si ça ne vous va pas maintenant, c'est que je ne suis pas la bonne personne, trouvez quelqu'un d'autre. Et non, il me gardait, il voulait encore que je continue. Donc j'en ai bavé pendant 4 ans, même si l'équipe qui m'entourait était absolument charmante. Ça a été quand même très dur de me sortir de cette affaire-là. Et puis j'ai proposé 1 ou 2 pilotes qui n'ont pas marché, qui ont été mort-nés. Donc j'ai un peu galéré pendant quelques années jusqu'au jour où enfin Breaking Bad a surgi et m'a sauvé.
Before we see your first clip of Breaking Bad, just tell me how you pitched it and to whom do you remember? There's always a guy who says, this is never going to work or something, you know.
There's always a guy? One guy?
Okay, 20.
You're lucky if there's one guy who says it will work. And not just with Breaking Bad, but with any project, any movie, any television series. And indeed, I was very lucky. You know, anyone who gets anything sold is lucky. You work hard, you hopefully have talent, but there's always an element of luck involved. And the way it happened was I had this idea that excited me very much, which is not often the case. As I'm sure there are plenty of writers in the room, and as you well know, writing is very hard, and you always hope for those eureka moments, such as Archimedes had in his bathtub. And in a writerly sense, you want that eureka moment where, you know, I have it. And I had that situation with this idea, and I was very excited. And I went and pitched it to Sony Television, which became our studio. And as I pitched it to two gentlemen who run that company, a man named Zach Van Amberg and a man named Jamie Ehrlicht, they stared at me as I pitched the first episode. They looked like deer in the headlights. They were just kind of wide-eyed and looked aghast. And as I'm pitching, you know, and performing, when I'm not a performer, as I'm performing and trying to sell them on the idea, the sweat starts coming because I'm thinking, this is not going very well at all. But luckily, they went to their bosses, and they liked the idea. They found it edgy and probably difficult to sell, but intriguing nonetheless. And I was fortunate to have known these gentlemen in advance of this, so we had a history together. We'd worked on another project together. And they went to their boss, who runs Sony, the entertainment aspect of the giant Sony corporation. And I give him credit. He has remained consistent. He has stood by this statement. He has not been hypocritical in denying the history of what happened. The two gentlemen went to him, the big boss, and they pitched the idea for Breaking Bad, and he said, that is the single worst idea for a television series I have ever heard. And to this day, he now likes the show, but he does not. Very often, executives in Hollywood change history, and they become hypocritical. They say, I was behind it from the start. This man, God bless him, he says he continues to tell that story. And he is now very happy that the show did indeed go. He said, you are my executives, and if you believe in this, I trust you. That's what I hired you for, but I think it's a terrible idea. But so I appreciate that about him. And then we proceeded to try to find a broadcaster, a distribution part of the process. And it was very hard, and that was what I meant when I said most people said no, until luckily the AMC network said yes. And that's a very similar story to probably a lot of folks in the audience know, whether they attempt to sell movies or television series or books. And most people say no. It's very rare that there's a feeding frenzy where a bunch of people want it. I've never had that in my life. And it's very rare that the first person you pitch something to says yes. So a very time-honored story in that sense.
Il faut avoir beaucoup de courage et de persévérance quand on écrit. Il y a peut-être de nombreux auteurs parmi vous. Vous savez que c'est dur d'écrire. Vous écrivez, vous avez peut-être du talent pour vous trouver, parce que vous faites c'est très bien, mais après il faut trouver un type parmi les dizaines à qui vous faites des pitchs et qui vous regardent l'air de dire ça ne marchera jamais. Il faut en trouver un qui finalement voudra bien de vous et vous fera confiance. Ça c'est vraiment difficile parce que pendant toute la période où on essaye de de ne pas se décourager et d'écrire. On espère tous notre moment d'eureka. On se dit que nous aussi, comme Archimède, il y a un moment où on pourra courir en disant eureka, mais il faut bien que pour arriver à en faire quelque chose et à toucher un public, que ce soit pour faire un livre, un film ou une série télé, il faut que quelqu'un d'autre que vous soit persuadé que ce que vous faites vaut la peine d'être vu. Et donc c'est ce qui s'est passé. Moi, pour Breaking Bad, je trouvais que l'idée était géniale. Pour moi, dès le départ, j'étais très enthousiasmée par cette idée, ce qui n'est pas toujours forcément le cas. Et j'étais persuadée d'avoir quelque chose qui vaille la peine. Et donc j'ai accepté d'essuyer des échecs s'il le fallait, jusqu'au jour où je suis allée voir les 2 gars de Sony pour la production télévisée. Et je me démenais, je racontais mon histoire, je faisais mon pitch, je jouais, alors que je suis très mauvais acteur, mais je jouais, je commençais à transpirer parce que je voyais bien que ces gars me regardaient des yeux complètement exorbités, comme des lapins pris dans des phares de voiture. Et je me disais, bon, ils vont me dire non, c'est pas la peine. Et à la fin, ils ont dit, bon, d'accord, oui, nous, ça nous intéresse, on pense que c'est très bizarre, que ça sera très difficile à vendre, mais c'est intriguant au moins. Donc je suppose que dans leur bouche c'était un compliment, et donc ils sont partis voir leur patron, le big boss de Sony, pour présenter le projet. Et cet homme-là, il se trouve que c'est un type honnête, il y en a parfois dans ce métier. C'est que sur le coup il a dit, je trouve que c'est invendable ce truc, c'est la pire idée qui soit pour une série télé. Et aujourd'hui, il aime la série, donc il a changé d'avis, mais il a l'honnêteté de le reconnaître. Il continue de raconter cette histoire, il continue de dire qu'il trouvait que c'était nul à chier à l'époque. Donc rien que pour ça, moi je lui suis reconnaissant, parce que c'est bien de reconnaître qu'il n'a pas eu de flair à ce moment-là, mais il nous a fait confiance. Il a dit, moi j'y crois pas, mais bon, si vous croyez que ça vaut la peine d'être fait, allez-y, je vous souhaite bien du courage. Et donc on n'en manquait pas, donc c'est là qu'on a commencé à chercher le réseau de distribution, donc la chaîne qui allait nous soutenir, et voilà, c'était lancé, on a trouvé, mais je crois que cette galère est absolument inévitable et assez classique dans tous les cas. Il ne faut pas se décourager quand on a des revues. C'est rarissime que vous écriviez quelque chose et que tout le monde trouve ça génial. Moi, personnellement, ça m'est jamais arrivé. Il y a toujours beaucoup plus de gens qui vous disent que ça ne vaut rien, mais il faut tenir bon, et le facteur chance est un facteur qui reste toujours nécessaire.
And so Breaking Bad came on the air, went on the air, I think, 2008, early in January 2008, and the viewers discovered that man, Walter White, who's a chemistry teacher, he wanted to get the Nobel Prize, but he ended up teaching high school. He learns before his 50th birthday, around his 50th birthday, that he has cancer, that he's going to die soon, and he just breaks bad and becomes a meth dealer. I guess everyone knows that, here, in this room at least. But I'd like to see a clip of this incredible character and his evolution throughout the show. It's from season 1 until the last season. There's a big spoiler in the 3rd clip for those who haven't seen season 4 the full way. Just, so you won't scream at me afterwards. We'll see the clip. Did you? That's well, we could watch the episode if you want. Did you plan all of these changes and transformations in your character from the beginning? Did it? It shows it's very coherent. The 3 clips that we saw are coherent, and they're 4 and 5 seasons apart. So
I am glad they're coherent, and yes, the broad idea of this was something that we abided by the entire time. The short pitch that I gave to the companies was that we would take Mr. Chips and turn him into Scarface. In other words, we would take a very bland, everyday man, very law-abiding citizen, and by his own sheer force of will, we would have him transform himself because of external forces. At least at the beginning, external forces acting upon him. We would have him, by force of will, transform himself into the villain, into the bad guy. And so we did abide by that. That was a very good, very generalized roadmap a spine, a structure, if you will, on which to construct a series. Having said that, the individual twists and turns of plot, the individual moments of character, the details. I always think it's funny, there's two opposing statements, two opposing cliches. The devil is in the details, or God is in the details. I love that those two are equally true. But the details of the show were the result of a very wonderful collaboration between the people in front of the lens, in front of the camera, and the people behind it, the actors and the writers and the directors and the cinematographer and the production designer and all the crew. And it was a wonderful process of discovery of this character. In other words, the question usually arises, you know, how much did you know? How much did I know going into it? How much did I have plotted out? And other than the fundamental structure, take the good guy, turn him into the bad guy, I had very little. And the collaborative nature, the organic process of discovery and the collaborative process of creating a TV series, which I love, contributed to create the thing that you see. And it was the result of a great many people working very hard and contributing their good ideas and their talent and their hard work. And indeed, very often I didn't know where we were going next, and we slowly found our way.
Je suis très heureux que vous perceviez une cohérence dans l'évolution du personnage. Pour répondre à votre question, oui, je savais dès le départ l'idée globale, la trame que j'ai présentée dans mon premier pitch, c'était déjà ça, qu'on partait d'un type complètement quelconque, banal, gentil, qui, uniquement à la force de sa propre volonté, au départ pour des raisons extérieures, mais après finalement uniquement en raison d'une détermination qui se met en place en lui, finit par devenir un salaud, un méchant, Scarface. Et donc ça, c'était l'idée de départ, c'était la colonne vertébrale, le squelette du projet, mais après, petit à petit, c'est vraiment dans les détails. Et moi, il y a deux phrases que j'aime beaucoup qui sont contradictoires, mais les deux me paraissent justes et pertinentes. Il y a une phrase qui dit que Dieu est dans les détails, et il y a une phrase qui dit que le diable est dans les détails. Et donc tout se construit dans les détails de cette évolution, de ce personnage avec les intrigues successives qui l'occupent. Ça s'est fait vraiment dans cette collaboration très, très belle entre les acteurs, l'équipe derrière la caméra. Donc dans ce travail que nous avons fait, où nous avons navigué à vue, là nous avons construit les détails. Nous ne savions pas vraiment où nous allions, mais au fur et à mesure, nous avons réussi à donner chair à cette première idée dont je ne me suis jamais départie, mais ça a vraiment pris corps et ça a existé à travers le travail, l'invention et la créativité de toute une équipe de personnes.
And Walter White came to life almost a decade after Tony Soprano, and who's the sort of quintessential anti-hero, as we call them now. But it seems like you're not being very nice to the writers coming after you, because he's sort of the ultimate bad guy, Walt, and I don't know what more you can do, and because he doesn't have two sides now. I mean, he's almost unbearable to watch, and how do you keep people watching him?
That's a very good question. Why do people keep watching this man who is so very bad now, if you're up to date with your episodes? It's a question I lost sleep over in the early days of the show. I worried very much that Walter White would be sympathetic. I knew he would lessen in sympathy as the series progressed. Indeed, that was the whole point of the show, that transformation. But you can see if you watch that first episode, the very first episode again, that I laid it on a little thick, perhaps, in a writing sense. I made him a little too likable and lovable and sympathizable. He's a good teacher who does not seem to get listened to, paid attention to by his students. He has to work a second job. He gets humiliated in the second job by his rich students. He has a wonderful son who has special needs, who has CP. He's got a surprise baby on the way with his wife. And in hindsight, I can realize that this was my fear that he would not be sympathetic enough. I figured the audience really had to believe in him at the start, because as he lost sympathy, we needed to hold on to the audience. It has come full circle for me, my understanding of this phenomenon of Walter White, in that now I personally have very little sympathy for the character, but I hear all the time from people in the street, anecdotally, I hear all the time people saying, I love Walt and I want him to get away with it, and why is his wife always nagging him, and why is Jesse complaining about shooting some kid off a motorbike, and why can't they just leave this poor man alone? And this blows my mind. I find it, but I don't think people who feel that way are wrong. I find it very interesting. It's a very interesting sociological phenomenon, I suppose, the way people who are fans of this
him still actually want to watch him is that he's actually accomplished something, and he's got his Nobel Prize now. Only it's a Nobel Prize in crime, and being a, do you sort of relate to that?
I think there is truth to that. I think that we like our characters in fiction, be it in novels or movies or television series or theater. We like competent characters. We love James Bond. We love characters who are capable and who can accomplish their goals, no matter what their goals, no matter how high their goals may be. And in the case of Breaking Bad, no matter how bad their goals may be, their goals are goals nonetheless. In Breaking Bad, Walt's goals are hard to achieve, nevertheless, even though they are very questionable at best. They're very often very bad goals. But Walt is smarter than we are, certainly smarter than I am. When Walt, in other words, when Walt comes up with an amazing escape from his brother-in-law in a season 3 episode in which he's trapped inside his RV and his brother is circling, and Walt comes up in 10 minutes with an idea that took 7 of us writers the better part of a week to come up with. So it's at least speaking for myself as a viewer, as sort of the first fan of Breaking Bad, because indeed, as writers, we try to please ourselves. That is our goal, story-wise. And I find myself intrigued by characters who are competent and capable, and go about their lives with courage. And that is part of what I think, at least for me personally, resonates for the show. I can't speak to any other viewer, but for me, this is a lot of what the show is about. Is a show about a man moving forward through his life with courage. A man who previously had none, or had very little. A man who was, figuratively speaking, was afraid of his own shadow. And in this first episode of Breaking Bad, he learns he has very little life left, and instead of retreating further into fear and anxiety, he shuffs it off. He throws it off like a heavy overcoat, and he says, "I'm not going to live in fear anymore." And I think people perhaps respond favorably to that as well. I will speak for myself again. It is hard to imagine a life without anxiety, without fear, and I think I enjoy writing. I did enjoy, past tense, writing Walter White, as dark and terrible as he could be. I enjoyed writing. And as I was writing, in fact, living in the head of a person who could do things like stand in front of a bunch of armed men who could kill him at any moment and say my name. I couldn't do that. So it's I think that's what we enjoy from our fictional characters, our James Bond types or our Darth Vader types. And that's what I enjoy about the creative process, about living in their heads for a short amount of time.
Oui, cette explication selon laquelle finalement peut-être que le public aime ce personnage parce qu'il a réalisé quelque chose dans sa vie, et à défaut du Nobel de chimie, il peut peut-être espérer avoir le Nobel du crime. En effet, il me semble que les héros que nous aimons, que ce soit dans la littérature, dans le cinéma ou à la télévision, ce sont les héros puissants, ce sont les héros qui réussissent à faire des choses que nous ne réussissons pas forcément à faire dans la vie. Et nous, en tant qu'auteurs aussi, on se fait plaisir, on écrit des choses qui nous paraissent au-delà de notre propre portée. Et lui, c'est un type malin, c'est un type qui arrive à avoir des idées géniales. La façon dont, dans la saison 3, il sort des griffes de son beau-frère. Lui, il lui faut peut-être 10 minutes pour avoir cette idée, alors que nous, on s'est mis à 7 auteurs à réfléchir pendant plusieurs journées avant d'avoir cette idée-là. Donc, il est plus malin que nous et on s'amuse à le créer plus malin que nous. Donc, il me semble qu'on a envie de ça. Et puis, après tout, cet homme, si on ne juge pas ce qu'il fait, mais on regarde son évolution, il se trouve que c'est un homme qui s'est débarrassé de sa peur. Au début de la série, il apprend qu'il ne lui reste plus beaucoup à vivre, donc plus grand-chose à perdre. Et il accepte, lui qui avait peur de son ombre au début, il accepte de se débarrasser de sa peur et de son angoisse et d'affronter sa vie avec courage. Et moi, je suis quelqu'un en tant que spectateur, mais aussi en tant qu'auteur, qui aimerait aussi arriver à me débarrasser de ma propre peur, à surmonter mes angoisses. Et donc, comme moi, je ne peux pas vraiment le faire, je sais que la peur n'est jamais très loin, cachée dans nos vies. Ben, je m'amuse à imaginer un personnage qui est là face à des mecs qui peuvent lui tirer dessus d'une seconde à l'autre et qui lui dit « dis mon nom ». Comme moi, je sais que je ne pourrais jamais faire ça. Pourquoi me refuser un personnage qui peut le faire à ma place?
And he's obviously become a master at his craft, and we'll see how he doesn't do it alone. He does it with Jesse. We're going to see how he cooks his meth. Juste pour les personnes de la technique, on va peut-être passer directement au dernier extrait ensuite, si c'est possible. Merci. I have this sort of theory about your work. I've seen your work a little bit. I've talked to you several times, and I feel like you make your show the way Walt cooks his meth. Very meticulously, with an astute sense of detail, and that it's sort of, if there is a self-portrait in a way in the show, it would be that one, that angle. I don't know if you agree with that at all. Is that a kind of showrunner that you are?
I like that comparison, odd as it may be. I do like that, and I take it as a compliment. Walt is very persnickety, we say. He's very precise, very measured, very careful, and he takes great pride in his product. And indeed, I take great pride in Breaking Bad, and all of the people who worked on Breaking Bad came to take great pride in it as well. And I was so appreciative of that. I'm not even sure how it happened exactly, but we had a crew who was as fiercely loyal to the series and who cared as much about it, who was enthusiastic toward it as I was. They were as enthusiastic a crew as I have ever seen. In the early days, before we had to embargo the scripts for fear of them getting out into the world and for spoilers to occur, we made all of the scripts available to all of the crew people, right down to the people who drove the truck with the toilets in it, and we would see people reading the scripts in between setups and poring over them, and that was a marvelous feeling of satisfaction that 130, 140 people working on this show cared that much, cared that deeply, and it became very much a labor of love and a point of pride that the show be as no show is ever going to be perfect, but if we could work very, very hard and endeavor to get it as close to perfect as possible, that would make us sleep very well at night and feel very proud. And that was, in that sense, I guess it is a little like Walter White and the point of the pride he takes in his own product.
Oui, j'accepte volontiers le parallèle que vous faites entre ma façon de concocter les épisodes de ma série et toute la méticulosité l'attention et la fierté que Walter met dans la fabrication de son produit à lui. Il y a effectivement comme ça une espèce de dévouement et de fierté et d'attention extrême que j'ai la chance de partager avec l'équipe tout entière. Ça, c'est quand même quelque chose que je n'ai jamais vu dans ma carrière, de voir à quel point chaque membre de cette équipe partage cet enthousiasme, ce dévouement, cette fierté dans le travail que nous faisons tous, chacun à son poste. Hein. Il s'agit d'une équipe d'environ 140 personnes, et je dois dire que, bon, après, il y a les questions de contrôle qu'il y a sur les scénarios. On essaye de ne pas les divulguer pour empêcher que ça circule et pour empêcher les spoilers, mais avant, au-delà de cette question-là, au moment où on laissait circuler, on laissait en fait les textes circuler parmi toute l'équipe, et on voyait que tout le monde, y compris les gars qui sont là pour apporter les toilettes préfabriquées sur le plateau, tout le monde entre les prises est là en train de lire les épisodes suivants, et tout le monde est complètement passionné et dévoué à l'entreprise qui nous réunit, et ça a été quelque chose d'absolument unique et merveilleux, qui fait que vous endormez tranquille, vous êtes extrêmement fiers de faire ce que vous faites. Donc je suppose que la série parfaite n'existe pas, mais si j'arrive à trouver une équipe et une implication telle auprès de toute l'équipe dans la prochaine que je fais, je serai un homme heureux.
As we saw in this clip and a lot of other moments in the show, it's things without dialogues, there's a lot of long scenes in the show. Can you tell me how you cook this up in the writer's room? Do you actually, there are some scenes that I count are like 9 minutes long. Mm-hmm. In the last episodes, the few last episodes, it's becoming more and more like that. It seems like there's like 10 or 15 scenes in an episode. I'm not counting, but you know, it's very, you're slowing down even though a lot of things happen.
We love showmanship. We try to learn from the best, and I think at one point Stanley Kubrick, who is a hero of mine, Stanley Kubrick at one point was asked about his creation of the amazing sequence in 2001: A Space Odyssey, when quite a bit of story time is expended getting a character from the Earth to the space station that rotates, set to Strauss's The Blue Danube. And story-wise, you know, they could have just got the guy to the moon very quickly, but it's this amazing, beautiful sequence that if you've seen the movie, you will never forget. And the critic said to Stanley Kubrick, "What was that about?" And he said, "Showmanship." That was about. And the other thing that we always quote from Kubrick is that he was asked what a movie is, and he said it is 6 to 8 non-submergible scenes, which I take to mean 6 to 8 moments in 2 hours that are so unique or interesting or edgy that they, or just plain done with such artistry that they will not submerge into one's forgetfulness, but instead they will stay buoyant in one's memory. They will never be forgotten. And that is that's what we try to do with this show. And we love those scenes. We're very proud, in fact, of something I spoke about earlier. We love the moments with no dialogue. One of my writers on the show, we all felt this way. My 6 writers and myself felt this way. One of my writers, a wonderful producer, director, and writer named Peter Gould, came to me very pleased one day with his script he had written. He says, there are 5 pages straight without a word of dialogue in this particular episode. And he was so enthusiastic about that I couldn't help but smile. I patted him on the shoulder. I said, "That's great," and it was, because that to me is visual storytelling. That to me is cinema. And I use, this is television, it's not cinema, and yet there's no reason it can't be the same thing. Cinema versus television, it uses the same exact tools, it uses the same processes of production, pre-production, production, post-production. And in fact, if you were transported, like on Star Trek, onto a set, nowadays, especially anywhere, an indoor set on a soundstage, an outdoor set out on location, you'd be hard-pressed to know, is this a movie set or is this a television set? In the United States, certainly, you wouldn't be able to tell a difference unless you looked at the trailers that the stars are in. If there are huge, enormous trailers, it's probably a movie set. If there are smaller trailers, it's probably a television set. But that's really the only difference. And we love those moments of cinema. We love those moments that translate throughout countries, that translate, that those human moments that remain. We love our dialogue in Breaking Bad. We love putting words into our characters' mouths, but we also love the moments of silence, the moments in which we get to use music and cinema.
Donc au sujet de ces séquences de plus en plus longues et de plus en plus fréquentes à mesure que la série avance sans dialogue et des scènes très longues, des séquences très longues, en fait je ne trouverais pas mieux pour vous répondre qu'une citation de Kubrick que j'adore, à qui qu'on interrogeait sur le sens de cette séquence dans 2001 Odyssée de l'espace où on voit cet homme décoller de la Terre et aller jusqu'à la navette sur de la musique de Strauss, et on lui disait mais alors qu'est-ce que vous voulez dire, quel est le sens de cette séquence, et il disait c'est le spectacle. Et je n'ai rien d'autre à dire que c'est du spectacle, qu'on est là pour faire du spectacle. Et là je continuerai avec une autre citation de Kubrick à qui on disait qu'est-ce que c'est qu'un film, et il disait oh c'est entre 6 et 8 scènes insubmersibles. Et ça fait un film. Et effectivement, si 6, 8, je ne sais pas, mais si j'ai un certain nombre d'instants, de moments magiques dans un épisode, dans un film qui reste à la surface, qui ne risque pas de plonger dans l'oubli du regard du spectateur, je suis heureux, j'estime que j'ai accompli ma tâche, et c'est tout ce dont il s'agit, de marquer visuellement l'esprit des spectateurs et nous faire plaisir à nous, et ça c'est quelque chose dont nous sommes amplement conscients, y compris dans la salle d'écriture. Et j'ai Peter qui est un de mes co-auteurs, coproducteurs avec qui je travaille très bien. Je me souviens encore, un jour il est arrivé fou de joie, tout excité, en me disant je viens d'écrire un épisode, dedans il y a 5 minutes sans un seul mot de dialogue. Et il était ravi. Je n'ai pas pu m'empêcher moi aussi de sourire, de lui taper dans le dos, de lui dire c'est super. Et effectivement, ça a été super, ça a été une séquence très belle. Donc quand on adore aussi écrire des dialogues pour nos personnages, on adore les faire parler et savourer chacun des mots qu'on écrit pour eux, mais on sait aussi qu'il y a des séquences qui se passent de mots, qui se passent de langage verbal, et qu'il y a un autre langage qui sera infiniment mieux traduit et mieux perçu à travers le monde, avec tout simplement un moment d'humanité, un moment d'échange entre les personnages en connivence avec les spectateurs et parfois accompagné de musique.
I'd like us to see a last clip, which is one of my favorite scenes in Breaking Bad, and it's almost nothing. I mean, doesn't make really the narrative go further and further. It does a little bit, but anyway. And it's all about the visual style of the show, the directing style, it's surreal elements, and it's the swimming pool scene.
It existed for long at all. If I worked for two companies who were cowardly, who were afraid of the darkness of Breaking Bad, I either would have quit a long time ago, or I would have given in and created a much different, much less edgy and dark show. It was a wonderful and somewhat unique experience that I had with these two companies, in that they were as good as their word to me from the beginning. They said, we believe in this story you want to tell, and we will be courageous right alongside you. I mean, I don't know that I was particularly courageous, but they were courageous. We will be courageous and not try to censor you, not try to stop you. And they were as good as their word. There was only one time where my writers and I put forth an episode, and they said, you may be going a little too far. And it was the episode in which Walt watches Jesse's girlfriend, Jane, die. He watches her choke to death after a heroin overdose. And it's a very hard to watch scene, and he does nothing to stop it. He allows her to die. He, in fact, is culpable for her death by refusing to aid her as she chokes. And to their credit, the two companies called me up and they said, we're concerned about this, not that Walt is so bad, but that you were only, at this moment, you were only 16, 17, 18 episodes into the series, and we want it to go a fairly long time, and we wonder if you were making Walt too bad, too sinful, too criminal, too early in the life of the series. And I said, your point is well taken, but I think my gut tells me this is the right thing to happen now. And they said, after we talked about it for 10 or 20 minutes, they said, okay, all right, you've convinced us. So they've been very courageous, which is somewhat unique for Hollywood.
Pour ce qui est de la question du courage des studios, en effet, la réputation de Hollywood pour sa lâcheté ou pour sa prudence sur ces questions-là, comme par exemple ce que vous disiez à propos de l'impossibilité de montrer à l'écran quelqu'un avec un revolver sur la tempe, les studios sont connus pour être extrêmement lâches. Leur réputation n'est pas...